Thanks for staying with us. Let's take a look at your market news now. Asian markets rallied on Wednesday after US President Donald Trump hailed very good phone talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping and said the two would meet at the G20 next week, renewing hopes of a deal to end a painful China-US trade war that has jolted the global economy. The US president's comments provided a much-needed boost to investors after a month of volatility sparked by his shock decision to hit China with fresh tariffs, ending months of apparently positive negotiations. Adding to the upbeat mood were comments from the European Central Bank head Mario Draghi, hinting at a cut in interest rates to support the stuttering Eurozone economy. By close of trade, Tokyo's Nikkei rose 1.7%, while over in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng picked up 2.3%. Mainland China saw the Shanghai Composite rise 1%. Wall Street stocks rallied on Tuesday on upbeat comments on trade by the US and China that we've just spoken about, and as the ECB signaled it could cut interest rates. Donald Trump said he had good conversations with President Xi Jinping and would hold an extended meeting at the Group of 20 summit in Japan later this month. Xi said the two sides will both gain by cooperating and lose by fighting. Those remarks raised hopes that the two sides may finally strike a trade deal after multiple tariff actions on both sides. The Dow Jones Industrial Average finished at 26,465 points, a gain of 1.4%. The broad-based S&P 500 rose 1% to end the day at 2,917 points, and the tech-rich Nasdaq Composite Index advanced 1.4% to 7,953 points. Let's get some more on the markets. We come to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. My colleague Arabile Gumede is standing by. A very good afternoon to you, Arabile. What's happening in the markets today?
Yeah, good afternoon, Nzinga. Well, the market has gone up as well today, 0.5% higher, following possibly that positive sentiment coming through from the United States yesterday. The S&P 500 is just 1% away from that all-time high figure it reached up in early May. So certainly some good sentiment coming through from the United States. Of course, they are daring to hope that the US Fed will continue in the same vein as ECB leader there, Mario Draghi, with regards to perhaps hinting at a future rate cut. No real rate cut perhaps expected today, but markets still feeling quite optimistic and buoyant. How does that translate locally? We'll find out, unfortunately, only on July 18th. But I can tell you now that with a figure of 4.5% for that inflation rate here locally, it certainly does give clear argument to perhaps another rate cut for South Africa. We'll see if things come out that way. But has that positive sentiment come through into Europe? Let's take a look at those numbers. Well, there are your numbers. Here's the detail. Michael Traherne, portfolio manager at Vestac, joining us now as we get into the details a little bit more. Michael, thank you so much for the time. So a positive day for the JSE. Of course, it follows on from the rest of the world. Nothing really to write home about really on our front, is there?
Well, it's great to see green on our screen. It makes a nice change. And it's just overall positive sentiment coming from global markets. It's when both Trump and Xi both confirmed that they're going to meet each other at the end of next week at that G20 conference. Markets have higher hopes. They're expecting that because the two leaders of the country are meeting, they'll be able to hammer out the trade deal and then send their skivvies essentially along to sign it later. So if that happens, good news for trade globally, and global trade that picks up means global growth picks up, and that's good news for everyone.
Yeah. Has the market perhaps not been too, quiet or tired of the whole sentiment yet?
Yeah, there's definitely been the case where the market was expecting things to be easy, and then Trump made a few comments earlier this year that were offbeat, and the markets collapsed. I mean, they dropped quite significantly. But there's been positive sentiment coming through, and there's no doubt that a trade between the US and China, being the two biggest economies globally, that matters for everyone, and by extension, that matters to markets. So it's something that the market's going to keep an eye on until these things normalize.
Okay. The Fed is obviously the key conundrum, I suppose, today. It's not about whether Jerome Powell and his team cut interest rates today, but really about sending the same sentiment through into future, right? The hope is that they'll continue to see that come to the fore. Will they hike in July?
Yeah, so at their previous meeting, there were no comments about cutting rates. So I think there's fairly certain that today they won't cut rates. Generally, central banks want to tell the market what they're going to do before they do it, so you don't have shocks. I mean, shocks create issues for everyone involved.
Sure.
So more than likely, the sentiment today is going to be, we're not going to cut rates, but based on if certain criteria is met, one being US inflation, which is lower than expected. If that happens, if inflation stays low, if growth rates stay low, then there's reason to cut rates. And if certain criteria is met, then we'll move on.
Michael, I'm going to have to interrupt you, unfortunately. We are going to have to cross back then to my colleague, even Mzwandile Mbeche, who I think is in Cape Town as well. Then the president is doing a walkabout in Cape Town, obviously before that State of the Nation address tomorrow. Let's head over now to
Sure, I'll be very velvety. No, we will make sure that between the two of us, the chair of the NCOP and myself, that order is maintained, that all the rules are applied very equally across the board, and we'll make sure that we start and we finish on time. If we can't, we shall still start and finish.
So how is the man of the moment feeling? So are you ready for whatever eventuality?
Well, I'm quite relaxed. I've been taken through the process by the Speaker and the Chair of the NCOP. They were actually telling me what to say. They've already written the speech, so I was reciting the speech that they have written. So I'm ready.
President, who are you speaking to tomorrow night? Investors, the nation, the youth? How important is this address?
Well, it's an important address, particularly taking into account where we are as a country, where the economy did not perform well in the last quarter. So there are quite a lot of challenges that we face as a nation, which we have to address, and they cover all our people. So I'll be speaking to all South Africans, and I'll be addressing a number of issues that cut across the issues that are of concern to all of us as South Africans. And out of this, we hope that we will be able to dream big as South Africans and reach out for the stars and be galvanized to go and build the South Africa that we deserve. This is the moment when we have to move forward with greater determination to that South Africa that all of us deserve after the years of apartheid and colonialism. So I think this is a great opportunity for all of us.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let's not push the president to give you the State of the Nation address.
Not today.
Well, that's the president there, just giving us a sneak preview, really, of what he will be saying tomorrow. He has just been in the chambers to inspect what was happening, what is happening, what's going to be happening. And I do get a sense that he was also going through some of the teleprompters. Remember, these days, he's very fond of using the teleprompters as opposed to the traditional way of reading the speech from the paper. As they are still talking amongst themselves there, perhaps we can go back to Arabile to continue with some of the issues on the program.
Thank you so much for that there. My colleague Mzwandi Lembeche, of course, out in Cape Town there, ahead of the State of the Nation address, which will be, of course, put forward by the President Cyril Ramaphosa. Tomorrow, we will, of course, have that for you live here on SABC News. Do stay tuned for that. But for now, let's continue, of course, with our market update. As we had noted, of course, the Federal Reserve is going to be quite important. I am joined here at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange by Michael Traherne then from Vestact Asset Management. Michael, we're still talking then about the Fed. Apologies for that interruption.
No worries, haven't had breaking news happen to me before. There's always a first for air.
That's excellent. So the president then interrupting, unfortunately, but the Fed chair and the sentiments around that interest rate cut. How does that perhaps then translate back home? Because does it put pressure on the Reserve Bank here locally to cut rates next month? And I know it's a while away, but it does surely send some sort of message.
Yeah, well, in December last year when we raised rates, the key reason and basically the only reason for raising rates in South Africa was the US and Europe are going to be raising rates in 2019. Yeah. South Africa has to do it first so that we get ahead of the ball. Now, you understand why the SARB does it. They want to be very cautious, and I understand that. But I think sometimes trying to forecast what other central banks are going to do is not the best policy to do locally. We now got to a stage where there's definitely going to be no interest rate hikes from the Fed or the ECB this year, and more than likely there's going to be rate cuts. Fed probably going to announce some sort of rate cutting later this year today. And yesterday, Mario Draghi saying rate cuts on the card for ECB as well. So no doubt in South Africa, it gives us more room then to cut rates. And like you were saying earlier, CPI came out this morning, 4.5%. That's smack bang in the middle of the SARB's 3 to 6% target. It means they've got room to cut rates. And it's worth noting that a lot of our inflation is in relation to our currency and the oil price. It's not really demand push inflation in the sense that people in South Africa are borrowing too much money and spending too much. So it actually gives the SARB very big room to cut rates, and probably more than once in the next 12 months.
Yeah, but now we won't get a 50 basis point hike, right? Because that seemingly is too aggressive. Why has that become sort of the status quo in a time when perhaps this is one of the levers that the Reserve Bank can afford to perhaps use, and it still wouldn't be perhaps lack any sense of integrity, yet it probably wouldn't be willing to move by that much?
Yeah, we're moving to a stage where slow and steady seems to be the norm. We're coming off a very low base already. Even though we're not at record lows, we're near low bases. And because you at the fringes of what's normal, small cuts, small changes is generally what's preferred, just because you don't want to rock the boat too much. So more than likely a 25 basis point cut now, and then towards Christmas maybe another one, particularly if the rand holds at these 13 to 14 levels.
Okay, well, another one then of key importance is a global one, but we've mocked, if you want to call it that, the likes of Bitcoin and Ethernet of any kind. And cryptocurrency has certainly been a buzzword for a while. And now Facebook and a conglomerate of other companies, obviously, are deciding that they're going to get into the space with something called Libra. Why don't you tell us more about that?
Yeah, very exciting. I think using the word cryptocurrency is probably a bit of a stretch. It's just effectively an online payment system, and it'll more than likely be fixed or pegged to the dollar. So the key here is they want to keep it steady, whereas if you look at something like Ethereum or Bitcoin, it's very, very volatile, which makes it not great for a currency to be used. So more than likely going to be pegged to the US dollar, and because of that, it then you can use for transfers. So as easy it is for me to send a picture on WhatsApp from me to you, you'll be able to send money to anyone who's got WhatsApp, who's got Instagram, who's got Facebook Messenger. You'll be able to send money all over the world. Now, if you're South African and you've got family based in Zimbabwe, for example, or in East Africa, you'll know how expensive it is to get money offshore. It's normally about 10% in some cases. Now you'll just be able to do it. If they've got WhatsApp, you just send them Libra coins from South Africa to Zimbabwe, for example, and then they'll be able to cash it in on that side. And it's worth pointing out that two of the big partners on this are Visa and MasterCard. So wherever Visa and MasterCard are accepted, more than likely you'll be able to spend Facebook Libra coins as well. So it's something that I think will revolutionize globally. And if you've ever been to East Africa where M-Pesa is ubiquitous,
that was my next question. How's that going to affect business there?
Well, it's also worth noting that Vodafone's one of the partners on this as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see you be able to convert M-Pesa directly into Libra coin as well. So M-Pesa is so huge in East Africa. You can pay your taxes with it. You can pay rent with it. Sure. You can buy airline tickets, or you can just go to your local spaza shop and you can buy something there. So M-Pesa is already the model that you can see working at a domestic or national level.
Yeah.
Facebook wants to do this at an international level, and they've got the backers to do it. And it's about time. Sending money internationally is far too expensive, far too slow, far too regulated. This is a way of skipping all of it, because Facebook effectively is the biggest country in the world. It's got over 2 billion users. What's China at? 1.3.
Yeah.
So, yeah, huge user base, the partners to back it up, and disrupting an industry that's already too expensive and too slow. So this is exciting. Launching 2020, early next year.
Yeah. Let's see how it goes. Interesting innovations, Michael. Appreciate the time, though.
Thanks,
Joining us here in studio at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, Michael Traherne, their portfolio manager at Vestact Asset Management. Now that market, as we noted, 0.5% to the good, so some better sentiment coming through. Will the Fed make note and become just a little more dovish and hope that in future we'll get a rate cut from them? If that happens to be the case, who knows? There may be some good news for you, South Africa, in July, a petrol price cut, and then an interest rate drop. All of that, we cross fingers. Well, from me, that's where the buck stops. It's back to Nzinga right after the short break. Do stay tuned. This is On.